Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. Here we get a lot of hardship. Now, here's a little thing. 100 Years of Solitude is not an easy book to read. However, it is one of the most rewarding books to read as well, too. 100 Years of Solitude is a story that spans over the course of 100 years and oversees 6 generations of one family. The founders of the village Maconda, which is based on the actual village in Colombia, Atacanda, Aracataca. In the end, we get a story that is somehow telling the stories of the past, the present, and the future all rolled up into one. Now, after contemplating for several minutes, you get the sense that Gabriel Garcia Marquez went ahead and wrote this 100 Years of Solitude due to several other reasons. According to one story that I heard, Gabriel Garcia Marquez was going on a journey with his wife and kids on a little holiday when he just suddenly, abruptly turned into a U-turn, went away from their holiday destination, and asked his wife to take care of their finances for the next few months because suddenly the idea of a new book came to his head and he just had to go back home to write it. What an interesting plot hole, if you ask me, even for real life. Now, Gabriel Garcia Marquez went ahead and was one of those fantasy realists, or whatever they call them. It was one of those genres where you can mix fantasy and reality, where it seems like this can happen in reality, and in fact things that happen in reality happen here. However, it just doesn't really seem to make much sense to us because it's fantastical. Someone has a donkey head and you're fine because, well, donkey heads are normal in this world, something like that. Gabriel Garcia Marquez went ahead and wrote this because realist fiction is interesting. It's, of course, also noteworthy to say that the past, the present, and the future are all mixed into this. In fact, you talk about the past in the present, and then you talk about the present going on forward. And then you skip ahead into the future and talk about the future as if it is in the present. If that's not a mix of the past, the future, and the present, then I'm not sure what you can call that. As I mentioned earlier, 100 Years of Solitude is really hard to read, and it is one of the most hardest things to read because of all the reasons I just stated. Once you get the gist of it, though, you will finally be able to understand and have the most satisfying feeling ever. I kind of reread it twice because I couldn't understand a word of it at the beginning. Oh, I'm sure I understood the plot. I couldn't understand what it was supposed to mean, though. In the end, after you read it and probably reread it, you will also get some irony at the end of the book as well, too. In the beginning of the book, you get this person who went ahead and was friends with a gypsy. He's the patriarch of the Buendia family, as well as being the founder of the Maconda village itself. All of this we kind of get, and all this we finally find out. We have this whole story to us because it is the story of the Buendias. There's no other story that is available to us. However, what we can get throughout the story is that we have several findings, we have several other stories, and we have several other plot holes. And we eventually find out that all of this was prophesied previously in several other generations. 6 generations before, the last generation of the Buendias found out what this whole text was about. It was written in another language and it had to be translated into Spanish. After it was translated into Spanish, he needed to decode the whole thing, and after that, he was able to make sense of the words. As soon as he was able to read the text, he realized that it was an account of all the experiences that his family faced. Except it was written years before any of the experiences ever happened. And in fact, the guy who was reading it realized that all the things that happened to his family was prophesied 100 years before. Eventually, we finally find out about all these experiences into our own world. Of course, back then, they had no idea COVID would exist. They have dealt with the Black Death, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez was not living in that time. In fact, he was living years ahead of that time. or should I say years afterwards, we are far ahead of our ancestors than of the Stone Age and definitely of the Middle Ages. Production has increased tenfold, if not hundredfold. In fact, it has been increasing exponentially. Gabriel Garcia Marquez was able to critique all this with his science and magic. Science and magic coexist together. That is how the iteration of all this really evolved. However, in 100 Years of Solitude, we experience 100 years of solitude inside a village of Maconda, which is, as I mentioned earlier, based on the Aracataca, the hometown of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. We find out the future, we find out all this, and then we find the irony, because, well, like most people reading this book, you are reading it in a translation from Spanish. You're probably reading it in a different language from Spanish, so you're not reading the original words. After you read the translated words, you finally get something else, and then you also have to make understanding of it because it is jumbling of the past, the present, and the future. And then you also get the irony because at the last time, you find out that this is literally what happened to the last kid, the last scene in the book. Now, I have to mention this a third time because Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude is really hard to read, and as I already mentioned, it is very satisfying to read. So once you understand all the plot holes, once you understand everything that happened in there with the characters and everything, you will finally get the whole point of the book. Of course, they could not experience what happened in the modern world. That's not what Gabriel Garcia Marquez was trying to do. What he was trying to do, though, was that he could be able to learn things from different things as well, too. You might not think that everything that happened in the 100 Years of Solitude was real. It isn't. What we can learn from is that Gabriel Garcia Marquez would teach us things. He would teach us humanity, the morals, everything that is worth something to us. And once we find out that little thing, we can do whatever we want. We can learn and we can probably grow ourselves. Obviously, we cannot make new societies in today's world, and I'm pretty sure Gabriel Garcia Marquez knew that because he was a devout leftist and was a pretty big supporter of the Cubans. However, we still learn something from the book. Regardless you're leftist or rightist or somewhere in the middle, you will be able to learn something. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Han Chung John. I hope to see you guys soon. Until next time, Shinana, peace. Bye bye.